Welcome to this section. We're going to be discussing on flow. What is flow in sport and flow in competition, and understanding it a little beyond also just general flow state. We have with us Miss Priyanka Prabhakar. I'm delighted to introduce her. She's the first women sports psychologist who actually traveled with the team. It was the women's hockey team, and I'm sure we definitely want to know a little bit about your experience there and connecting it to flow. And the rest we will get to know more as the discussion begins, right? So welcome Priyanka.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
I'd like to first begin with, what was an aha moment for you? It doesn't necessarily have to be in sport. Let's begin with an aha moment for you in your life.
Okay. And when you're saying aha moment, can you tell me more about it?
So it's that spark, that click. You just know you're flowing. I know it probably is a juxtaposition of the word flow many times, but when things are just in synergy, in symmetry.
Right,
So
right.
it could be at any point. So can you, what comes to you? I'm sure there must have been a few aha moments, but what comes to you at the outset?
I think multiple situations come to my mind where I have felt extremely happy, being in that particular situation. Maybe I can describe the characteristics of that particular situation. Maybe I feel more energetic when I feel in sync.
Yes.
I feel that I can handle this situation. I think I'm capable of
Right.
managing this particular situations. I feel more calm,
Right.
feel more slow.
Yeah.
These are
So what you're saying is you're actually in the moment. You're connected to that space or that energy center.
yes, absolutely. That is the way I feel.
Right. Awesome. And now let's talk about aha moment with your athlete. And maybe even I will share then. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us an aha moment with your athlete?
Okay. So, I have heard, multiple athletes talking about how they have felt and what has really given them that energy to go out there and perform. Some of them have spoken about, how, being with friends has made them so comfortable and being at ease. And then, that has given them the energy to go out there and perform the next day. Some of the athletes have spoken about how, when they listen to the favorite song,
Yeah.
gives them that energy and uplifts their mood.
Right.
That is one of the things. And I also remember working with a group of athletes. And the coach, we were having a session and the coach ended up speaking about each of the athletes' strengths.
Right.
That day,
I feel so good just listening to it.
that day was so amazing because we all saw the kind of performance that the athletes
That's the
delivered.
state of flow.
Yeah.
Right. So it's beautiful that you brought in the coach, because he or she is one of the most important person or figures in the entire sports ecosystem.
Right.
So when one talks about one's strengths, which is what even Dr. Mihaly, the flow researcher, says is you focus on your strengths. And especially when it comes from the coach, right? It has such a significant impact. It's like there's this, you all formed this circle and you all were in that state of flow. So that's a beautiful experience. That's a beautiful example.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah. As you're talking, what comes to me is I'm training to be a Jungian analyst, right? And I'll give this example of one of these golfers, okay, very young golfer. And he would be like, every time his session would start, right, he's like, what should I do? I want to do this, I've done this, can you tell me this? See, I would feel like I would feel choked, like I'm like I would feel like, and this was a young golfer who was very talented, but he was inconsistent, which is what we normally hear in sport, right? Like there's inconsistent performance. And the main reason was, of course, it's pressure in the the entire, if you look at the entirety of the situation. But if you tease it down, it was because this guy would not come into himself, would not allow himself to touch flow. right? And so and I'll give you this one example where he said, he met one of the top Indian golfers, and he said, so he suggested, start reading, right? And I mean, read so many pages. So the next time I met him, he said, you know what, ma'am, he said this, X said this, and I started reading 5 pages every day. I said, oh great, okay, that's a great advice. I said, so can you tell me the gist of something you read yesterday or today? What touched you? It's a blank expression, right? And that's when I said, listen, for me it doesn't matter if you're just reading one chunk, one paragraph, right? But pick up something. Is this touching you? What's touching you, or what's irritating, or does something inspire me? And that is where you get more in touch and more in sync and more in synergy, right? So now this was this athlete, okay? So I call him this do. And with him, he's like, every time he's like, what should I do? What should I do? And I'm like, please don't do anything. I want you to be, And there was this one session, okay? And I think that would probably touch on like our role as sports psychologists, is we were having this discussion, and this was a guy who was very much in the head, and that's exactly what we're trying to say with flow is it's embodied. Your mind and body is together, right? It's not just me being in one state, and me, it's not like my mind is running 100 miles per hour.
Yeah.
So there was this, and we were doing I was taking him, and as Jungians we work a lot with images, right? And also being in tune with the field, right? Like now you and I are also talking, so there's this space, the field that we are connected to. So with him, normally that was what, and my whole aim would be to calm this guy down, and it would be like almost like his BP is just shooting up, and to bring him down. And there was this beautiful session, where I think that was an aha moment for me, in especially with someone who's so cognitive, right? Which is, I think, one of the challenges for us as sports psychologists. And I said, okay, took him through little embodied, took him through a little bit of centering, and I said, call upon an animal which you feel can aid you in what, you're looking for, be that in performance or energy wise.
Right.
And immediately what came to me was a horse.
Oh, okay.
And I kept quiet, right? Like, now this is what's come to me. And then he said, I want the energy of a horse.
Okay.
And I said, this is exactly what came to me. And we went into the characteristics of the horse, what could aid and what he would want to take. And that was a flow. That was being in synergy with this athlete. And I think, as Jungians, we call this the analytical container, because it's what you pick up in the field. So with him, I would always be picking up rushed. But what I needed to bring in was a little bit more of homeostasis, a little bit of centering, and for him to call upon this, call it the power animal or the animal which gives you energy, which can aid his performance. So thank you for that example where you brought in, the coach talking about the strengths, and the coach being so open.
Yeah.
Because there are examples of the opposite of flow, which we both know, but we will stick to this this aspect of it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So have you felt that some athletes touch themselves a little more, are more connected to themselves, and are able to come into a state of flow? I won't say easily, but they come into flow, let's say, consistently. What do you feel in your experience?
Yeah, I think, of course, it depends on how much aware the athletes are of themselves.
Right.
Yeah, and how much work they have done on understanding. Because I think from what you've spoken previously, you spoke about how we are all separate yet connected.
Yes.
Right? So how we can touch each other in different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that there are athletes, the more they are connected to themselves, they're also connected to others.
Yes. Yeah.
So they know that, they don't have to pick others' issues and make it their own.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you're saying because I was working with one of these elite teams, and it was a little bit of a slow start, if I
Mm,
may say.
mm,
But one of the senior players, so he's a very quiet guy, but he started doing this exercise, right? Like this clapping, and then you start clapping in
mm,
in,
mm,
in
mm,
sync.
mm,
So, for example, if I clap one,
mm,
two,
One, two.
and then
Yeah.
so we come into a state
Sync.
of sync
Yes.
and
Yeah, yeah.
synchrony and balance, right?
Mm.
And then that kept increasing. And what happens is also, if you see, we were talking, so we're kind of in the head. The minute we got into this, we got in our
Yeah.
bodies as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what you said, because it just shifted the mood.
Mm.
So we had a bit of a slow start, yes, whatever, and the team is down. But then what do we need at this point of time, right? So what's going to bring us into some state of connection,
Mm.
right? It's Dr. Stephen Porges is someone I think
Yeah.
we both adore, who gave us the polyvagal theory.
Yeah.
His one of my favorite quotes of Dr. Porges is, safety is not just the absence of threat but the presence of connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thought, connection you brought in, Priyanka, because if you look at elite sport, right, athletes are so disconnected,
Mm.
but teams that come together are those who can connect despite the differences,
Yeah.
despite the setbacks, right? There's this really nice book which says that tournaments are won in the locker room, matches and tournaments, not in or on the ground.
Mm.
What do you feel about that? Especially, maybe you can connect it a little to your experience with hockey, if you would like.
Yeah, and I feel that, so many of the teams that I have worked with, I know that what happens, before they go in for the tournament, the kind of energy that they go
Yes.
with really determines the, moment of the match.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
basically, the kind of, like so many times what happens is coaches can just predict whether the athletes are going to win or not really going to perform based on, how their
How
energy
the
levels
energy.
are, how are they supporting, how are they connecting, are they talking more to each other,
Yes. Yes.
every single thing they just know.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
feeling very lethargic. That's also probably because some of the athletes are feeling anxious on the team,
Right.
and that gets reflected on the field so much because they're more in the head, they're thinking about the
Yes.
mistakes.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. And that's when you see more of a tunnel vision, because
Mm.
I'm focusing on myself, and that's where probably the mirroring comes in, right?
Yeah.
I remember one of these teams that I was working with, this athlete, and he was a bowler, okay. He would talk incessantly when he's anxious. So, there are critical moments in the match, and imagine there's a batsman who needs to go in, or, there are two of them and they want to focus. So, I had to like tell the bowling coach that, listen, this is one of the concerns that we need to look into. Are you going to be okay?
Hmm.
Because also, there's a particular way in which the coach also functions, no? So he said, okay, don't worry, I got it, I'll probably pull him out, and and I'll probably ask him to throw a few balls or something like that. Because then that field that you just spoke about stays intact. And also, to give credit to this bowler, right, he's aware of it. So he said, I don't want to do, but this is what happens to me. So then I went in with, then we go in with, okay, so now that you're aware, what can you do? You need to pull yourself out of that situation so that it doesn't affect. Or can you go to someone who can actually help you calm down and come into a state of flow? So that's a brilliant example. Yeah. So now I'm wondering, as we're talking, do you think there's a correlation between athletes' state of mood, athletes who are content, and coming to a state of flow? I mean, they may not be able to get into flow every single time, but does it aid coming to that state? What do you feel?
Yeah, I think definitely, there are different layers of the same flow, is what I feel, to different levels of flow. Yeah. So basically, like, you can see that some athletes are more in tune to themselves and to their sport,
Right.
they're extremely connected, and
Yeah.
you see the
Yeah.
way they perform out there, because they are mainly focusing on their process, and
Yes.
they're not really worried about the result. And like, for example, I think Neeraj Chopra,
Yes,
right?
that's exactly who came to me to
Yeah,
mind.
yeah.
If do you want to say, or would you
No,
like me
it's okay.
to?
Go ahead.
Because I think with Neeraj, starting from his Olympic, right?
Hmm.
And the most heartening thing was his coach telling him, he said in his interview, "Jaake maze karo yaar."
Hmm.
Okay, and how many coaches do you hear say this,
Hmm.
right? Or not just coaches, how many parents, you know? Because I kind of feel being in that process, the message that goes to your brain is we're fine, right?
Hmm.
So your sympathetic system does not need to get overloaded, does not need to go get ready for war,
Yeah.
right? And I think he's one of the best examples for following the process,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that's the mistake a lot of athletes go, and especially if we remember Rio Olympics,
Hmm.
which was a catastrophe for India. Every time I heard an athlete going, "I'm going to go for gold, I'm going to go for medal," I'm like, oh, because that's something we tell ourselves, or
Yeah.
athletes need to tell themselves, go for gold, all that is fine, before, not as you come in, because that's what you're
Yeah.
trying to say about the process, right? And I
Absolutely.
think that's exactly what he probably told, or I think what he said.
Yeah, he was telling that I was only focusing and visualizing what my throw. I did not really think about the result part of it, and which is
Exactly.
so necessary for the athletes to practice. And flow is of course a process.
Yes.
There's a process which is involved, that you have to follow in order to get into that particular state. It's not like it just happens whenever you want it. It's hard work to get there.
Exactly. It's you've been doing that hard work. You've been
Yeah.
preparing yourself. What you're saying actually reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. Okay,
Hmm.
or one of my favorites, I think, is it's by a caddy who tells a golfer, "There is a perfect shot waiting for you.
Hmm.
All you need to do is get yourself out of the way."
Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's a very beautiful quote, no?
Yeah, yeah. Because what he's actually saying is, there's also a similar quote by Osho which says, to use the mind, you first need to get out of the mind.
Yeah.
It's because there's so much of psyching negatively, or that what will happen, oh my god, da, 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 unwanted,
Hmm.
thoughts, unwanted self talk,
Hmm.
which then again triggers the sympathetic system.
Yeah.
Whereas what we've been discussing, and the flow really is, you're in the right balance. You
Hmm.
can't be totally low, right?
Yeah.
Rafa Nadal's, zone is going to be different from a Federer's zone. But then we can't tell them, no, you match that. You know what works for me. What are the factors which work for me, right? Like what you were saying about Neeraj,
Yeah.
right? Which is what we see. I mean, I think with Neeraj, what he's instilled really is that hope and that focus on what is important at this point of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really the key. Because
Absolutely.
what Dr. Mihaly also says is that,
Hmm.
right, that moment is what's most important.
Absolutely. And I think as you're talking about it, I'm only thinking that there's so much pressure that athletes face, right? And like, let's take any particular tournament. There are so many spectators
Yes.
watching athletes, and it's very difficult for them to probably get into the state of flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we remember what happened to Simon Biles,
Hmm.
I remember I had to go on air, and um uh, and then I see so many comments. Some people go, and I was just looking up what was actually,
Hmm.
there were people supportive or people not supportive, and people were comparing it to, she's not mentally tough.
Ah,
We
right.
already know how many medals she's got. You can't say she's not mentally tough. But
Hmm.
the thing is, and something she said is what you're saying, that we're talking of just the spectators over there, which probably was lesser during Tokyo Olympics due to
Yeah.
COVID. But then if you also look at social media these days, because what she said was, she said the number of people tweeting, tagging you before an event, especially like Olympics, is insane, right? And the amount of pressure that adds. And I'm sure this is what we do. I in particular ask athletes to get off social media, especially leading to a major tournament, and most of them actually do. But I kind of like, what I tell athletes is, who are you in connection with? Is this person, is this particular aiding you? Because then you don't want to be getting psyched negatively.
Absolutely. And also, when we keep focusing in terms of, I have to probably live up to this person's expectation, that person's expectation, it's going to be too much. How many people's expectations are you even going to live up to, right?
Yeah.
It's quite tough for anybody for that matter. And then your energy is getting invested everywhere, and you don't have any energy for yourself more than anything.
Yeah. I want to give this example without naming which team it was, but it was one of the leagues, not the cricket league. I've also worked with other leagues, so so it was this very high profile team, and a lot of who's who in the team. And I remember someone in the leadership group, right? Like without taking names again, so he's like, "Doc, go with no expectation." So this was the first culture session, okay? And he said, just go, like, don't expect you're going to like make a big impact right in the beginning. And I said, that's not what I'm thinking. I mean, as psychs, most of the time we get this. I mean, now it's little better. And I said, no, I'm, the aim is to aid the team. And of course, I'd met all the players. Even with teams, I always meet each player. So I kind of knew what was what, kind of felt the energy a little. And opened them up with a little bit of fun, then a little bit of images, activity, reflections. And one of the elite players, like one of the top players, he said, this is one of the best sessions I've had.
Wow.
He said it openly. And it was also very heartening where they started opening up. Like one of the senior players was like, I'm sorry, there was a bit of miscommunication with like just some information and all that. And at that point of time, right? And it was a men's team again, and I was the only female, but all those differences just seem insignificant, right? And it felt like what you were saying, this circle of trust was beginning to form.
Wow.
And I think for me, that's been one of the most heartening sessions, because I really experienced flow. And I have to say, I was talking about, the elephants at one point of time, and I was connecting it, play and what I learned. And I was in the center and the group was like this. I could see that awe in the players.
Wow.
And at that point, I felt, even as a psychologist, Priyanka, I was accepted.
Wow.
I felt like, we were one unit. It was, I think these are the,
absolutely,
times, these are those flow states, these are these beautiful states that we look to establish, right, as a psychologist. And then I think you even stop being a psych there, you become one unit over there.
Seriously, very beautiful. And I like the point that you made, that how playfulness is important quality that we have to cultivate, and that can aid the flow process.
That's beautiful. Yes, that's really been a gift from the elephants to me, because that's absolutely true. I want to bring in this example of this very young athlete, very chirpy, okay, and she used to say, so I asked athletes, which animal do you connect to? And I think at that time I was also wearing a dolphin, and she like, oh ma'am, I love dolphins, and I said, okay. And as we were coming closer to the competition, you start seeing her shrinking.
Right.
Like, and there was this seriousness, and then I said, what's happening? And she said, oh, I need to get serious, because the competition's coming close. And you just realize how my body language has changed as I was just describing it, whereas when I was describing, that flow state, it's much more open. And I was trying to help her understand that, listen, then how your brain's going to interpret it is, there's pressure.
Absolutely.
That's where you're creating angst. Like when sometimes I remember a particular athlete, especially like someone like Virat, who's so animated, right? You see him enjoying on the field, and that's just him. That's really the energy is open. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be like that, but then let's say the team doesn't perform, then people are going to say, oh, you were dancing before.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
absolutely.
how does that matter?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what is the connection between play and flow.
Yeah.
Like for example, if you're having fun, there is an assumption that probably you're not taking things seriously.
Yeah, and I love this because I think this has been one of my biggest challenges, to help athletes realize that you're not at war.
Hmm.
Just be yourself. Like, we're enjoying this discussion. Imagine if we weren't, and like we're just sitting like this and having a straight face, then we're really not engaging, right?
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what I see with the elephants, and what I also see with teams which are a little playful, and there are going to be
Yeah.
some players who are a little more open, maybe the
Yeah.
extroverts, and where you can bring in a little bit of play even in, like, let's say your warm up,
Yeah.
and music. We all know Terry Olick has done so much of work with
Mm-hmm.
music and performance, because you're opening up your system.
Absolutely.
And the exact opposite of this, Priyanka, because this girl was this girl's coach who would act, for a lack of a better word, like,
Hmm.
they have to be like this, that. Like, the academy was almost choking me, and I said, listen, there needs to be some breathing space, there needs to be fun. You because if not, they've become robots.
Yeah, and I think there's a misconception that psychology sessions are going to be very boring. But then that's not really true, because we like having fun and we will make the sessions fun. And
Yeah.
I have seen, like, whenever there are activity based session, the players are of course having such intense schedules.
Yes.
Yeah, when you bring in that, they feel that, oh, I'm so relaxed today.
Yeah,
So it does
exactly.
make a lot of
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also because it's what are we mirroring?
Yeah.
Like, they're anxious, and if you just say, okay, don't be anxious, don't be stressed, it's not going to happen, right?
Absolutely.
It's really, and also your personality. I mean, okay, our personalities are quite similar. We it should help an athlete ease in. Maybe someone may be a little more serious, that's okay, but the point is, you help your athletes ease in,
Mm.
and also connection to their own core self.
Yes.
I think that becomes very, very vital.
Mm.
I have to give this example of one of these elite cricketers, and this was a meet and greet session in one of the tournaments, and so it was like everyone had to meet the psych, okay, and he came in, and you could see body language fully tight, okay, like this, and of course you sense it, and you kind of just go, okay, tell me a little about yourself and all that, and then we also had an elephant connection and all, and most importantly, his role,
Mm.
right? The session went on for around 40-45 minutes, and
Okay.
then at the end of it, he said, oh, this wasn't so bad. And his body language was so much more open,
Yeah.
and I was honestly shocked.
Huh.
And then I said, oh, is that what you were expecting? And he just shrugged and laughed, and he said, okay, doc, see you next time. And that was a moment of connection we formed,
Yeah.
like, which started with rigidity, but then it flew through. And I think that's what we try, right, Priyanka, as as sports psychs, because in the previous chunk, I was actually talking about Michael Phelps taking the 200-meter butterfly in one of the Olympics with practically being blind.
Mm.
But point was, now that was a situation which could have ended in like catastrophe, but he flowed through.
Yeah.
So like, recognizing what aids you to flow, and also how can I shift. So first, recognizing, is my body language tight, can I feel my breath, all these become very important, right?
And I think like it really connects to what you spoke about, are you enjoying
Yes.
just your very essence of your being?
Yeah.
Right? And apart from that, you also mentioned certain things, that if you're more in your head, then what happens, and if you're more embodied, what happens.
Yeah.
So these things definitely contribute to your well-being as well as to the performance as an athlete.
Definitely. And that's something Dr. Mihaly says, that there's you're totally embodied. It's like when you see a really good performance, let's say an art, where the doer and the act has become one, and then the audience also come together. So this artist she's working with, which is again performance, right? So she also brings in, how can you bring in the group together?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's also what we're trying to do here, right? Like these are recorded, but I think we're hoping that, the audience too actually come into the field, though we may not
Yeah.
be able to hear what you're saying, but that's exactly what it is. So me picking on Priyanka picking on me, there's a field here which is within us.
Yeah.
But if I get into my head, like she was saying, then I'm disconnected firstly to myself. So then maybe Priyanka has to pull me out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then probably aid, first to bring me to the state of nowness and here-ness.
Yes.
And
yes.
then maybe what brings me to flow.
Correct. I remember this one situation where, one particular athlete, she would overshare whatever is happening
Right,
to her.
right,
Like, for
right.
example, if she's anxious, she would go around telling everybody, saying, I'm anxious and I'm anxious.
Ah.
And, I'm just thinking of it as you're speaking, because that was affecting the,
Team.
the energy levels of the
Yeah,
team.
definitely.
So then, there were certain guidelines which were issued in terms of, who can you go share it with.
Good. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So that everybody is not affected and
Yeah.
not right before a competition.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. I know of one of the swimmers, Indian swimmers, and he shared this in a group session. So, that's why I still won't take his name. But, he said, I would go tell, my opponent, I'm going to beat you right and left. I'm going to. And then, I've also worked one-on-one. And then he said, ma'am, that's how I deal with my anxiety. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. And then, and then the younger players in his club, right? They're like, I'm going to tell people, I'm going to be like him. And then I said, well, do you know why he might be saying that? Of course, I couldn't go and say that, this is the reason. But I said, son, why do you need to say that if you're already full?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Correct.
And also, like this girl you were saying, for her to also recognize that, my sharing maybe helps me feel better, but is it really helping the group?
Absolutely.
And is this something I should go talk to the psych maybe, or psychologist, sorry, or maybe the coach, but not like pull the energy down.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think so these reflections are so important. And what you are saying, I have to say, a lot of times when I hear athletes, right, I'm here. Like there was once this athlete who was injured, and so I said, and this was a recurring injury. Okay, so I said, what happened last time? How did you cope? And I'm sure you experienced this as well. And she was just breaking down her schedule, and I said, just listen to yourself. Your voice is flat, your tone is flat. There's just no energy, and where are you forming that connection? Right? And then I said, what was my question first of all? So one of the things that I actually ask athletes to do, especially, I think I didn't start with the intention of bringing them to the flow, but I think this is one of my favorite topics, as you know, Priyanka. But I think what helps people really connect and come to a state of flow is to form deep connections with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very important in terms of what makes you more connected to yourself, because if you cannot connect to yourself, it's very difficult to experience that flow.
Yeah. So I give athletes I first ask them, and then they're like, oh, the first thing they'll tell you is, I'm so busy. I'm like, I'm sure you can take 10 minutes out of your day for your own self.
Absolutely.
And something I ask them to do is, go for and connect with nature, because I feel we're so disconnected as human beings from what's happening around. And do that. And with these athletes who are following timetable to the block, I also tell them, you're going to take 5 minutes, lock the room, play some nice music, and just dance like no one's watching, and get the energy out.
Yeah.
It's very, very important to switch off. I always say, including us, I feel like we're on a pressure cooker.
Absolutely. Yeah, like how do you know that it's reached a certain point that you need to switch off, because I think you're not in flow then, right?
Yeah. Is that a question you're asking me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I can actually share this, so I was part of the COVID bio bubble 2020, right? With RCB, I was with RCB at that point of time. And that was the first bio bubble. And as beautiful as the experience was, I think like a lot of people have said, being in the bio bubble is difficult. Like there's a lot of restriction. You're away from your family, and it's constant talk of just what's happening there. So I had this rule of, with my friends and family, you will not talk about the league, you will not talk about anything to do with any ex-player, any player, like the exes of the team. And most importantly, for me to realize and switch off my phone, switch off answering, why is this guy playing, why is this guy not playing, can I get ticket, tata, all this. And trust me, Priyanka, I and the lights were very bright, but I really feel like you also hold so much for the team. I loved the experience, but I also kind of felt I needed to take time to recharge. And I had an offer for ISL, the football league, and they wanted me to jump from one bio bubble to the next immediately. And I said, no, I'm sorry. I have to take care of my mental health. I have to take care of myself. And I'm actually so glad you asked me this, because I don't think I would have done justice or been able to flow had I gone to the next league.
Absolutely.
And even there with the management, there were certain times when I would say, like, okay, if it's just a team playful match and just like, let's say beach volleyball or something, sometimes I would say I just want some time off, because I'm an introvert and you need to recharge.
Absolutely correct.
So I think that's very, very, and in fact I have to mention this I was in the panel once. It was on the discussion of bio bubble. There was another very senior psychologist, without taking names, and he was saying, oh, we should do everything that we preach. And I was just thinking, I wish this gentleman would have asked me, because I would have said, listen, it's not easy. And I kind of feel it's very essential also for us to take care of ourselves, and also to recognize that we are human too.
Absolutely. And you won't be able to do justice, right, to the work that you're doing.
Precisely.
And of course, you're not in the state of flow when you're drained.
Yes, exactly.
Where is the energy going to come from?
And it was very, again, SOS. Some of the leagues take time to bring in the side. And I remember my sessions would like sometimes go to like 10:30 and stuff. And then one of the days, this gentleman who was coordinating, he said, oh, why don't you take a session like at 11 o'clock? You can see one more player. And I said, can you look at how I'm looking? I mean, and I think people don't realize, they think that you're just talking. They don't realize there's a lot of energy exchange, there's a lot of processing. We need to be in a state of connectedness with yourself, with the other person and the field. If not, then you're just talking from the head. You're not in a state of flow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think this was a really good point, really good discussion. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd want to add?
No, I think it was very, very nice. Last question I had was, how do people practice flow in difficult situations?
Yeah. I think here we can take in, like those who've been performing, like let's say, let's take an Abhinav Bindra. Abhinav Bindra, I think, is a really good example, because his first Olympics, he didn't make it, he didn't win, right? But he came back and went with what is needed, what are the challenges, how do I prepare myself. And in his book, A Shortcut History, he actually talks about going, I think he goes for commando training in US, and going with, if I can handle this, then what? But I also kind of feel, to get in touch with yourself, get in touch with nature, have those moments where you've also been connected to yourself, because you experience flow. So your system knows what is flow. And also connecting to this energy. I'll give this example. I think it's a beautiful example. So this was a young athlete who's doing very well at the international level. And he's a little on the anxious side. Okay, so one of these tournaments we were actually looking at, okay, tell me what happened. And and he said it was in Chennai, it was very hot, and then it started raining. I said, okay. And then he said, though my body cooled down, right, I performed well. So that was the cue, right? So I said, okay, let's look into this. There's something over here, rain and association and nature at the end of the day. And then he went to how he loved rain as a kid.
Okay.
And he started talking, his body language started opening. And there was this moment where I caught a glimpse of that little boy. He said, I would love, he literally did this, he's like, I would love playing in the rain,
Yeah.
getting drenched. And I said, hold that posture. And I'm like, this is what you want to build in. The next time I see him after the next tournament, he said, this is what I did, man.
Oh.
So that's so I think for us, I'm always listening to what's the story behind the story. And I think as important as it is for us to prepare for challenges like what Phelps did, but also what Neeraj said, focus on the process, what gets me to the process. And if we are involved somewhere, is tune in, catch what probably it was just this little glimmer over there of what can help this person connect deeper. Because when they get in, what we need is to get the parasympathetic back in action, calm them down. So hear the rain, and then the body embodied. So this becomes important along with handling and pushing challenges. So yeah.
I think it's very, very nice, and it was a very thought-provoking and very insightful discussion.
Yes, thank you. I think it actually flowed through. It
Yeah,
really flowed
yeah.
through. We had some thoughts and questions, but we were also very open to
Yeah.
let's see what comes up in the field. So thank you so much, Priyanka. This was really nice. And we hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you.